Well, good morning and welcome again to Chaparral. We're glad you're here. Today we are studying Family Promise, and so if anybody can stick around after our time together today, just head on down to the forum, which is just to the south here. We got to set up the rooms for those folks who are coming tonight. So if you can help with that, that'd be fantastic. Also, just to get one more reminder, we're not going to have a sunrise service for Easter this year. We're just going to do the 9 and the 10:30 services. So again, I hope you'll come and invite your friends and family to that. All right, for the last few weeks, we've been talking about climbing. And I'm sure everyone here at some point in their life has climbed something. Right? You've hiked, you've climbed up some mountain, some hill, or you ride your bike. Like if you've ride your bike maybe from southern Scottsdale to northern Scottsdale, you know that that's an uphill pedal, an uphill climb. And when you do that, you're starting to get an uphill area. You kind of, go down on the gears, your legs get tired, the bike begins to wobble, and you just keep pressing forward to get up to that top of that mountain. But when you get to the top, there's a real sense of accomplishment, like you've done something, right? You stop and you look out at the valley or look off that mountaintop, think, man, this is awesome. I've done some really cool things by getting to the top of this hill. And then, sometimes, we begin to compare. Oh, you climbed Squaw Peak? Yeah, well, I climbed Camelback. Oh, you climbed Pinnacle Peak? Yeah, well, I went to Superstitions and climbed that. We begin to compare with each other about how high we've gone and how high we've climbed. Or maybe we compare with the past. Oh, yeah, well, when I was a kid, gravity was heavier back then. It was harder to climb because gravity was heavier. You ever heard those back in the day kind of comments from people? Like I saw a few this week. Back in the day, Pluto was a planet and Saturn was a car. Remember the Saturn cars? Yeah? How about this one? Back in the day, if we wanted to watch a movie again, we had to rewind it. Remember that? Rewind it before you take it back to Blockbuster? Or back in the day, if someone wanted to talk on the phone, you couldn't go on the internet. No, remember that? Yeah, it was pretty bad. Like, hey, get off the phone, Mom. I want to check my CompuServe or Prodigy. Or how about this one? Back in the day, I had to climb uphill both ways in the snow to get to school. Who's heard that one before? What's that? Barefoot. Yeah, barefoot. There you go. How many have said that before to somebody? Nobody? Here's the thing. Is it even possible to go uphill both ways? Well, actually, the answer is yes. If you lived on a houseboat and the school was at sea level, if in the morning the tide was out, you'd walk uphill along that wooden plank to get to school. Then when school's out, if the tide came in, your houseboat would go up, and you'd walk uphill to get back to your home. So technically, you could walk uphill both ways to get to school. But the reality is, that's not what we mean, right? But the truth is, and to be honest, that sometimes in our life, we climb uphill both ways a lot more than we want to. That sometimes in our life, we find that every hill is uphill. Everywhere we turn, every journey, every step seems to be going uphill. And it gets to wear on us. And we get tired. And we need encouragement to move forward. We need someone to say, keep going, don't give up. We need someone to push us along. Now, that motivation can come in different ways. Several years ago, the teens used to have their camp in Sedona. And one day they wanted to go hike Mount Wilson. Anybody climbed Mount Wilson before? It's a pretty big mountain in Sedona. Well, I said, okay, well, we'll go. but you got to finish. You can't just go halfway, right? So to make sure they didn't, because I knew someone would be like, oh, I'm too tired. So we got in the van, drove to the Dairy Queen where that kind of trailhead is. And it's a lot of switchbacks up the backside of Mount Wilson. So I had them drop us off there, and I pulled one of those Cortez moments. Now remember, in 1519, when Cortez landed, first thing he did was he burned all the ships so they couldn't go back. So we kind of did that. We pulled the van up, got out, started climbing, and I had them pull the van around Mount Wilson to where the bridge is on the other side. So once they started, there was no going back. You had to go up and over. Now, by and large, they all appreciated it. They had fun. They got to the top. They complained and whined, but they kept going. When they got to the top, you had some really cool views of Flagstaff and all that, and they enjoyed their time together, but it required some motivation. Now, motivation isn't always burning the ships or moving the van. Sometimes we just need someone to encourage us and to move us along in the right direction. This week, our climb is not going to be up a hill or a mountain or walking out of a valley. Today, our climb is going to be up a set of stairs. Up a set of stairs to a place that's known as the upper room, where Jesus shares a last meal, a last supper with his disciples. We call this meal communion. Now, the first place it's talked about in the Bible is not the Gospels. Actually, it's in a letter that a guy named Paul wrote to a church in Corinth. He writes him a letter, and in this letter, he talks about this last meal that Jesus shares with his disciples. And this is what he says about it in 1 Corinthians 11. He says, "For I received from the Lord what I also handed on to you, that the Lord Jesus, on the night when he was betrayed, took a loaf of bread. And when he had given thanks, he broke it and said, 'This is my body that is for you. Do this in remembrance of me.' In the same way, he took the cup also after supper, saying, 'This cup is the new covenant in my blood. Do this as often as you drink it in remembrance of me. For as often as you eat this bread and drink the cup, you proclaim the Lord's death until he comes.'" Now, oftentimes when we talk about the Lord's Supper or communion, we kind of get caught up in the theology of it. We ask questions like, why does Jesus choose the Passover meal to do this? Which cup of the Passover Seder does he use for the Last Supper? What does he mean? What does he really mean when he says, "This is my body"? Some Christians believe in what's called transubstantiation. Big, huge, fancy word. What it means is simply this, that they believe that when Jesus said, "This is my body," he was talking literally. And that as an act of faith, they believe that that bread that you have in your hands or that you're given and that cup literally transforms. It changes substance into the literal body of Christ and the blood of Christ. It literally happens. Other Christians say, no, it's not quite that. It's kind of like that, though. They call that consubstantiation, with substance. That's Jesus is kind of with it, around it, near it, but it doesn't actually change, but he's right there with it. Other Christians say, no, it's not that either. It's a symbol. That Jesus says, "This is my body," he's talking symbolically. But the reality is, too, symbols participate in reality. They mean something. An illustration I use a lot when I teach a class called Experiencing Christianity is my wedding ring. Now my wedding ring is rubber. It used to be metal before I lost it. So I had a metal wedding ring at the time, and what I'd often do is I'd take it off, and I'd say to the group, I'd say, "Look, this is my wedding ring. It's a symbol of my marriage to Stacy. What would happen if I took this ring and tossed it in the trash?" "Oh, you get in trouble." They kind of laugh, that kind of stuff. Well, then I'd actually take the ring, and I'd actually throw it in the trash. Like literally actually do it. Boom. And it'd hit the can and rattle around, go inside and get coffee grounds and junk on it. And they're like, "Oh, you really did it." Someone would text Stacy, "Hey, Frank threw your ring in the trash," But I did it, and then it was a different response. Like when I talked about it, like, yeah, whatever. When I actually did it, they're like, "Oh, how dare you?" Why would they do that? Because actually doing it, taking a symbol, it participates. It's real. right? It happens. Well, the same thing here. This is more than just a piece of bread. This is more than just a meal. In fact, what Paul says here is we proclaim something in this meal. He says, for as often as you eat this bread and drink the cup, you proclaim the Lord's death until he comes. We are saying together around a meal that we proclaim, one, Jesus is who he said he is. Two, he died for us, rose again, and is coming back until he comes back to be with us. We proclaim all of that in a meal, which means that the communion table is huge. It's big. It spans denominations. It spans countries. It spans the world. Christians come together all over the world to share this meal today and then throughout history, because together as a group we proclaim his death until he comes again in this meal. It's a proclamation. But also, we do it regularly. He says, for as often as you do this. Right? We don't eat a meal once in our life and we're done, right? We eat all the time. We share meals all the time. And here, Jesus knows we need to do this again and again and again to remind ourselves that he is with us in those uphill climbs we face. When we're facing difficult times and everything seems uphill both ways, he says, I'm with you. And this meal reminds us of that as well. But let's take a step back from the theology stuff for a second and look at it as a meal. Right? Jesus is going toward the cross. We're approaching Easter, which also means we're approaching Good Friday. And Jesus knows that very, very soon, after 3 years of ministry, he's going to be leaving them. And he doesn't want his disciples to quit or to give up or to drop out of the race. He knows that they're going to need each other to move forward. That if they're going to be world changers, they can't be lone rangers, right? They can't go alone. And so he gets them together, not just to share a meal, but to model what that community is going to look like, what they're going to do together. So he chooses this upper room, this meal, to not just share information, what's going to happen in the next few hours, but to model for them how they're going to live together. So the first thing I want to share with you is this. In the upper room, we learn that faith happens best in circles, not in rows. Right? We're sitting in rows right now. Right? You're all sitting in rows looking at me. Not much to look at, but you're looking this way. Faith is better done in circles, in small groups, in communities, working together in projects with and for each other. We need each other, and that requires us to be facing each other together. Solomon, in the Old Testament, wrote about this. In Ecclesiastes, he writes, 2 are better than 1, because they have a good reward for their toil. For if they fall, one will lift up the other. But woe to the one who is alone and falls, and does not have another to help. And that actually flies in the face of our culture. Harvard University did a study that lasted 75 years. That's a long study. And in this study, they asked the question, what factors contribute to a flourishing life? What factors contribute to a life that flourishes? And in that study, they found that there's one thing above all others that kind of stands out, and that is solid, strong relationships. Having strong relationships is a key to having a life that flourished. And Jesus models that at the dinner table, right? He spends time with these 12 disciples that he picks. He hangs out with them, he walks with them, he serves with them, goes on mission with them, eats with them, lives with them. And of those 12, he has 3 he's really close to. 3, Peter, James, and John. With those 3, he goes to the Mount of Transfiguration a few weeks ago. He goes to Gethsemane with those 3. There's inner circle. But he builds these relationships. Later in the book of Acts, we see the church growing. And not just in rows, but in circles, in homes, around meals. And we find in Acts that these small groups were enemies sometimes. They were people that were enemies at one point, but now they were eating together. They were different races, different nationalities, different people, and they still came together and shared meals together. And that made all the difference in their lives. See, the process of eating together, I mean, yeah, conversation is great, but the process of eating together begins to teach us how to share. It really does. If you've been to a potluck or a family dinner, you know what I'm talking about, right? Anybody here not like bacon? Okay, good. You're all Christians. I'm just kidding. But you have this idea of bacon. So let's say you have 10 people for dinner, and you put the bacon out, and there's 14 strips of bacon. So 14 pieces of bacon, 10 people. You're first in line. What do? If you're my daughter, who's here in the front row, hi, Abby, you take 6. I'm just kidding. Right? I mean, but that's what you do. I mean, I see my kids, they're going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And they're debating, right? They're going like, okay, how many could I take and not get in trouble? Right? That's what they're thinking, because I'm thinking the same thing, just to be honest. Right? Because, okay, I'll take 1, and hopefully everyone else will be as generous as I am. I can come back for seconds. Right? But that's the idea. We learn to share. In my life, I like dark chocolate, and so I hide it. Because I know they come over for family dinner on Sunday nights, and they find it, and they eat it all that I've done for the week. So I saw this on the internet. Check this out. So you can take your chocolate and stick it in like a pea bag in the freezer, But then again, here, is that really sharing? No, right? I should be better. I should share with them my greatest prize, dark chocolate. And I do. But that's the idea, right? We learn in meals how to share together. And that's healthy. And by the way, when I say share, I don't mean just sharing bacon or sharing chocolate. I'm talking about sharing stories, sharing your life. That means when you share a meal, you don't just grab a tray and go sit in front of the TV. Or you sit on the table with a cell phone and you're Snapchatting and you're texting and IMing, all this kind of stuff. I'm talking like put the phones down, put them away, and actually talk to each other. Chick-fil-A, the restaurant, is kind of into this. In some locations, they have these called cell phone coops, like a chicken coop. And I'm not kidding, it's a challenge. If the family who sits together takes their cell phones, puts them in this box, this cell phone coop, they put them in there for the meal and actually talk to each other. At the end, when they're done, they get ice cream. It's kind of cool, right? I mean, like Chick-fil-A is kind of helping us out with talking. At the same time, it's kind of sad that we have to be rewarded with ice cream to actually talk to each other. But that's the idea, right? When we share our lives together and actually spend time sharing with each other. And that means also more, though, than just sharing a meal. It means thinking beyond ourselves as well. I read an article by a guy named Rabbi Abraham Twersky this week. And talked about a time when he was younger. And a rabbi came to him and said, "Young man, why are you eating fish?" He eats some fish. He's like, why are you eating fish? And he replies, "Well, I love fish." He says, "Really? You love fish?" "Yeah, I love fish." "So you love fish, so you went out, you caught it, pulled it out of the water, killed it, and boiled it because you love fish." "What?" Like, you don't love fish. You love the taste of fish. You love yourself. And he said that, really, sometimes relationships is more like our love for fish than our love for each other. It's what we get out of the relationship. In fact, he said this: people make a serious mistake. People make a serious mistake in thinking that you give to those whom you love. The real answer is you love those to whom you give. You love those to whom you give. Jesus gets to the upper room with his disciples. He's there with them, and what does he do? He says, "This is my body, which is given for you. This is my blood, which is shed for you." He gives at the table because he loves us. And after that, after the meal, it says he gets up from the table, grabs a bowl of water and a towel, and begins to wash their feet as a servant would. He gives to them this act of compassion and care and service. And then he challenges them and us to do the same. In John 13, he said, "You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for that is what I am. So if I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash the feet of one another. For I've set you an example that you also should do as I have done to you." So I serve you this way, you serve each other. You give. That's how you love. And then when we do that, when we share at the table that way together, in a circle, together, we then share that with others around us. The church community is built on this idea of mission and adventure and service to those outside of us. Alan Hirsch says real communities are built not on inward thinking, but on getting together to serve outside of that group itself. Because when you work together on a project, or if you've been on a mission trip, for example, you learn that you build these bonds with each other that stick around long after you finish that project. You build relationships because you've reached outside of yourself. You see, community is not formed by sitting around and waiting for folks to ask. It means getting involved. I've been serving in ministry for almost 2 decades now. And from my own experience, not a study, just from what I've seen, people who don't connect, who don't engage, who really don't have friends, typically it's because they've been sitting on their hands waiting to be asked. Instead of having the courage, or maybe just to get out of their shell and make a step to be a friend to somebody else. That might mean going to a class, meeting some people, or going to a small group and just trying it out, or helping out on some project that's really simple that, even if you're shy, it means just taking a step to have lunch with somebody. But a lot of people who don't have a lot of friends, I think, aren't friendly sometimes, just to be honest. That we need to make the effort to be a friend, to have friends. I know that can be challenging, it can be scary sometimes, but it begins by just something simple like, hey, you want to grab a cup of coffee? Or just talking to somebody. Or maybe going and just trying out that little Feed My Starving Children project. Working on something together, and you get to talk, and we begin to develop friendships that way. So I encourage you to step out of your comfort zone and begin to be a friend. So we learn in the Last Supper, in the upper room, that these relationships, even as simple as having a meal together, is what forms these tight bonds that carry us through these hard climbs. Look, those climbs are coming. Those difficult times, those steep climbs in your life, they're coming. So now is the time to build relationships with people that you can climb along with, that you can support and can support you, because all of us need friends like that when we have these hard climbs on the horizon for us. There's a little boy, and his folks moved around a lot. He was a salesman, his dad was a salesman, and they moved a lot. And so they moved to this new house, new town, everyone's new, house is new, and dad's in the garage getting ready for getting the house ready. They got all the stuff to move in and stuff. And so the little boy is bored. So he goes to his dad and says, Dad, yeah. Hey, Dad, what superhero would you want to be? Batman or Superman? Dad's like, dude, I'm busy. Just can we talk about it later? I gotta get this done. So just give me a little bit. Dad, what superhero do you want to be? Batman or Superman? He keeps on, right? Dad, come on. Finally, Dad's like, fine. I would want to be Superman. All right? Go back to work. Dad, why? Why Superman, Dad? Fine. Because he can fly. That's why. He can fly. I want to fly. It'd be awesome. Okay, go back to work. So he's sitting there. Time goes by. Dad, aren't you going to ask me what I want to be? Batman or Superman? Okay, son, sure. What you want to be? Batman or Superman? Batman. Okay, awesome. Dad, what? Aren't you going to ask me why I want to be Batman? Fine, why do you be Batman, son? Well, Dad, because Batman had a friend. And his dad stopped. He looked at his son. He's like, son, do you need a friend? He says, yeah, Dad. More than Superman, I just need a friend. There's a lot of us, I think, that need a friend. Maybe that's you today. You need a friend. And let me encourage you, start off by being one. Take a step just to be a friend. Get involved, get to know somebody. And then something else I want to encourage you to is remember this about the upper room. You have a friend. Jesus says this in Matthew 15. Let these kind of words kind of soak in today. I do not call you servants any longer, because the servant doesn't know what the master is doing. But Jesus says to you right now today, I have called you friends. So you have a friend. You have a friend who's with you in your deepest and steepest climbs. Let's pray together.